Welcome back. So, Chicago, Carolina, Colorado, I think they really jump started the trade deadline this year. It reminds me of the Horvat deal that we saw a few years back going to the New York Islanders. And so I wanted to do like another list of players who might get moved and just speculate on who I think might or might not be. And then I also want to, these are all in the order that they were at the start of the day when it comes to playoffs, and just discuss which ones I think should go all in and which ones I shouldn't, or which ones I think shouldn't. There you go. Which ones I think shouldn't. I shouldn't go all in at the deadline because I don't have a team, so it wouldn't make any sense for me to call a general manager. So, looking at the 10 names on the board, it is not the big names because, like, for instance, Tavares and Marner in Toronto, they're not getting traded. That's just, if they were going to be getting traded, we would already be hearing rumblings about it, and I'm sure that there'd be a lot more discussion than there is. And Crosby's not on the board because A, in the news video today I talked about it, and B, even if there weren't reports that he wasn't willing to be moved, I'm not going to put his name on the board because there's no reason to think he's getting traded. So we'll start off up here. Seattle, two players on the board. Yanni Gourde, yes, I think Yanni Gourde probably gets traded. I think Yanni Gourde can be a useful, I'd say, third liner for a team that's in contention. And yeah, I don't see any reason why Gourde wouldn't necessarily be expendable for Seattle. They've got some good young players coming up. I think Gourde's importance, not where it was their first season, so I think a trade probably happens. But Brandon Tanev, I'm going to go ahead and put an X there. I don't think Brandon Tanev gets traded. I think Seattle finds a way to keep him. Just my call, just my prediction. Just saying. I think Tanev's an important bottom six forward to them, and I don't know how much value you're going to get with Tanev either. I think in some cases, general managers might make a player available just to see what the market is, and when the market's underwhelming, as it probably would be for Brandon Tanev in general right now, then you hold on to the asset. So that's my guess, anyways. We'll see. Pittsburgh, Marcus Pettersson. I've got Grizzlick's name on the board. I haven't seen Grizzlick's name come up, and I'm surprised he hasn't come up because he is a pending UFA. Grizzlick's offensive numbers might be entertaining for a general manager who's looking for some offense, which Grizzlick, coming into this season, I didn't expect the kind of numbers he's put up with Pittsburgh. So my guess is that either or. It's one of those situations where I don't think it'll be both, unless Pittsburgh falls so far out of the chase for a playoff spot that basically they're just in full sell mode. But I don't think we're there yet. I know there might be Pittsburgh fans watching this and saying, but they should be. And I'm not going to disagree necessarily, but when you've got Letang, Malkin, and Crosby on these, expensive contracts and they're older players, you're going to want to surround them with a good team, and going into a rebuild / retool, it's difficult at this point in time. So I think Pettersson, Grizzlick, I think one of them probably goes. Pettersson has a higher market value, I would think. His name's been tied to a number of teams, including Vancouver being one that he gets mentioned with a lot. We'll see if there's anything to that. Joel Farabee for the Flyers. The Flyers are in this position where they're not really in contention for the playoffs, but they're still close enough that they think about it. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say Farabee gets moved. I think Farabee's gone as far as he's going to go with Philadelphia. I think Farabee gets moved at the deadline. I think they could get a good return for him. He's still young enough that I think there's going to be teams that are willing to take a chance with him. And he might realize his offensive potential elsewhere. Maybe it's just not working in Philadelphia. Think along the same lines as like Capo Caco going to Seattle from the New York Rangers. He's, now producing. We'll see if that's just a short-term thing after a trade or if that's going to work long-term. But at this point, it has worked. So maybe we'd see a jump in Farabee's numbers if he went to the right team. Ristolainen's name gets mentioned a lot. I think the fact that he has a 2-year deal, he has 2 years past this one, at a $5.1 million cap hit, it makes it difficult to move him. There are not a lot of teams, even though cap space gets accrued during the season. I don't think there's a lot of teams would be looking to add him, unless Philadelphia retains. But yeah, Philadelphia, I think, is in kind of tough. I don't think it's going to be easy to move Ristolainen. Maybe it'll be easier this summer. Maybe. So we'll see what happens with the Flyers, but yeah, I think Farabee is an easier piece to move than Ristolainen at this point. Ryan O'Reilly, it depends with Nashville on whether or not they keep winning. They've won a lot of games lately. They've won 5 in a row. So if they can drag themselves back, like if this becomes like a 10-game winning streak, then we'll be talking about them as potentially making the playoffs. So if they stay hot, O'Reilly doesn't go. But if they can't get any closer to the playoffs, I'll go ahead and put a check mark there and say Ryan O'Reilly, for what he brings as a veteran presence, he's got a Conn Smythe trophy. Absolutely, he'd be a popular target come trade deadline, and Nashville would very likely listen and probably move the player. Nashville, one thing that I think they need to focus on going into the summer, and the idea of, if they're going to do that rearming and going for playoffs next season, you want to be a little younger, and I think a little more fleet of foot than what we've seen with Nashville this season. You guys can let me know your thoughts, but yeah, O'Reilly, Seth Jones, his name comes up a lot, and I keep seeing, well, like, why don't we move Jones from Hawks fans and stuff. I don't know that Jones's contract's that easy to move. I'm going to say no with Seth Jones. And I don't have any information on this. This is pure speculation. I'm going to say no with Seth Jones. I think it's difficult to move that contract. And the weird thing is, I think he's played all right for Chicago this year. I'm not saying he's living up to the contract necessarily, but much like Darnell Nurse in Edmonton, I think he's had a good year. So maybe that brings his value up. Maybe he's more popular. Nick Robertson, I'm going to put a check mark because I hope he does get moved. I think Nick Robertson, in order to reach that next level, I don't think it's going to happen in Toronto. I'm not saying that as an insult to Toronto. I just don't think it's a good fit between player and team. And I think for Toronto, they're going to be looking to make some moves, and I think Nick Robertson is a piece that's going to attract some interest for them. So we'll see. Mikhail Granlund. So there are some interesting options for San Jose. They could be busy at the deadline. Granlund, he's played so well in San Jose that I know he could get moved. I know it may happen. I'm going to put an X. I'm going to put an X because the Granlund, Zetterlund, Eklund line has been very good. And the fact that Eklund is one of the guys they're building around, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Granlund doesn't move at the deadline and San Jose finds a way to re-sign him and keep him. If they can keep that Lund line together, and if they can, Celebrini and Smith or two others in that top 6, and maybe Toffoli gets moved. Like Toffoli, I'm not putting Toffoli on the board at this point, but maybe Tyler Toffoli gets moved at the deadline. But yeah, San Jose has a decent top 6 there, and I don't know that Granlund moves. So maybe instead of Granlund, maybe it's Toffoli instead. So I'll write Toffoli on the board here. So that's my guess. So you guys can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, questioning which teams should go all in at the trade deadline. Washington, I'm going to write no because I don't think they need to. Washington's going really, really well right now. They don't need to, be moving first-round draft picks and prospects to bring anybody in. I think they're in good shape. Ryan Leonard's going to be joining this team soon, and Ryan Leonard, he's the real deal. So I think for Washington, I think they stay the course. Carolina, I think they already have. I think picking up Rantanen, I think is a signal that this team wants to compete for a Stanley Cup this year. So the yes, I'm writing on the board because I think they already have. And I think for me to write no at this point would be foolhardy. And I will agree with them that, they have been in this position where they're a contender and they're close, but they're not quite, cup favorites necessarily. They need to get over that hump. So adding Rantanen's the first step, and now we'll look to see what the next steps are going to be. New Jersey's a no for me because they have a young core. We know this team's going to be together for a while. There are definitely some weaknesses with this roster, but I don't think they need to go all in. So what I'm saying, I'm not saying that these teams aren't going to pick up players. I'm talking about like that all-in scenario where they're adding like 3 players at the deadline and giving away first-round draft picks. And no, I don't think New Jersey's in that position. Toronto is a yes. Look, they're first in the division. Marner's on an expiring deal. Tavares is on an expiring deal. Whether they stay and they sign extensions or they go, whatever ends up happening, the financial situation for the Leafs could be just as perilous next year, and everybody's a year older as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say Toronto needs this, and so they're a yes for me. Florida, also a yes. Florida's still in their contention window. They win the Stanley Cup last year. They went to the final the year before. Florida's definitely a yes for me. Tampa's an interesting one in that I think this team needs some good young players. I don't think trading out a first round draft pick necessarily works, so I'm going to say no in the case of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Toronto, Florida, Carolina, I'm saying yes with. Boston is definitely a no for me. They're playing well right now. They are. They had the rough game against New Jersey, but in general, lately Boston's been playing better. Um, but I don't want to see them trading first round draft picks. I don't want to see them trading young players. I want to see them acquiring young players, getting draft picks, working on that development. And if that means that maybe they don't make the playoffs this year and other teams make it instead of them, I think that's okay because the long term picture with Boston's, I think, more important than this season. Columbus, I'm going to put Columbus in the no category as well. It'd be nice to see them make the playoffs and see what they can do there, but they're not in a position either to start trading away young players and draft picks. So I'm going to say no for Columbus. And I'm got these teams on the board, knowing darn well that by the time tomorrow rolls around and somebody clicks on this video, the playoff picture could look completely different. Then we go out west, Winnipeg. Winnipeg, I'm going to put them as a yes. With the regular season Winnipeg's put together and with just the sheer numbers that they've been able to accumulate, I do think going all in at the deadline makes some sense for Winnipeg right now. Very, very good core, but they're not getting younger, and you want to strike while the iron's hot while they're all in their prime. So, yes. Dallas, yeah, I'm going to put Dallas as a yes because they've already got some really good young players. They've got some other good ones coming up, and the development's been pretty good. I'm fine with Dallas making a big move and being willing to move a first-round draft pick, that kind of thing. So Dallas, for me, is a yes. Minnesota, to me, is a no. Teams are going to want young players, developing players from Minnesota that I think they'd be kind of foolish to give up if that were the case. I'm also not convinced right now that Minnesota is that close. Now, when everybody's healthy, if they start rolling again, we'll see. But right now, I think they'd be better off not going all in. I will repeat, does not mean don't add anybody at the deadline, just not trying to get in on that big deal, right? Because I don't think they're in that position. Vegas, we know what Vegas does. Vegas is always going to go all in at the deadline. They do it every year. Every year I look and I go, well, they're not going to be able to add that player, and then they do. And so I expect Vegas to do it again. Just like I always expect Vegas to come back and win games when they're losing. I expect them to be headliners at the trade deadline because they seem to do it every year. The Oilers are also a yes for me. So this is where things get interesting because if you're a selling team in the NHL, I don't think there's going to be a lot of them. And since there won't be very many sellers in the NHL, if we have a lot of buyers and teams that I'm saying should go all in, you might be able to get a really good return on a player on trade deadline day. So the Oilers, I think, are in the mix. The Kings, I'm going to put the Kings as yes too. Yeah. The Kings have had a good, strong regular season. They have a lot of good young players as well. I don't think trading away a first-round draft pick and maybe a prospect hurts the team. And if they add at the deadline and show that confidence in the team, then when they play the Oilers in the first round, because that's what happens every year, then you're in better shape, right? So all three teams in the Pacific, I'm saying yes. So in the West, I'm saying more yeses than nos. Colorado already has. The Natchez deal for Rantanen tells you they're going to be all in at the deadline. One thing with trading out Rantanen, that's one thing they don't have to worry about is the Rantanen extension. But they do need something at the deadline. So Colorado, I'm saying yes on them. They did win the Cup in 2022, and I think they want to get back there. Calgary's a definite no. So Calgary and Minnesota are the no's, and Calgary's a no because they're still, I mean, they're not in a rebuild. They're not, and I don't think they necessarily have to do a full rebuild. But they're also not in a position where if they add like one big name at the deadline, like say they added a Ryan O'Reilly or a Joel Farabee, it doesn't suddenly make Calgary an extension. It doesn't make Calgary a contender for the Cup necessarily, and you're going to have to pay a lot whether you've got the player signed to an extension or not. So we'll see how it goes. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Which teams do you think should go all in at the deadline, and which ones do you say, nah, they really shouldn't? And if they're not on the board, it's because coming into today, they were not above the playoff line. And if a team's below the playoff line right now, you do not go all in at the deadline to try to fix that, because that's crazy. Teams below the deadline generally don't go all in, so we'll see. The one that I thought about putting on the board, even though they're not above the playoff line, is the Rangers. I don't think the Rangers are going all in. I still think the Rangers are going through all the stuff they're going through, and you get that all dealt with first. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.